A little girl wandered sadly down a street in a small town. She looked about 5 or 6 years old, but in reality she was about 8. It was her unusual thinness and short stature. The clothes, which were clearly not the right size and therefore hung on her like a sack, also made the feeling worse. The girl's name was Daniela. Anyone would say she was a street girl, but that wasn't true either. She had an unhappy home life. She lived with her mother, who was raising her alone while still working to feed and clothe herself and Daniela. She spent the day at the market selling various products. She was paid by the hour, so she worked without weekends and in any weather. The rain, from which the leaky visor could not fully protect her, the wind was bone deep. With a job like that, it was easy to get sick. Since she wasn't officially employed, no one paid her sick leave. So she stayed behind the counter with a cold, until she got really sick. At the clinic, they said she had pneumonia. Who am I going to leave my daughter with? No, I can't go to the hospital. Well, I can't force you, said the doctor. But at least you should be on bed rest. And here is the list of medicines to be taken. The list was very long, and there was no money to buy most of the medicines. The woman could not count on any help. Her unhappy parents had died long years ago. Her boyfriend was gone. Daniela's father abandoned her as soon as he found out she was pregnant. So she had to do everything herself. Her daughter did everything she could to help her. She made compresses and bought medicines from the affordable list. But they were only auxiliary medicines, and they were useless. The fever was getting higher and higher, and there was no way to bring it down. At times, the mother began to fall into a semi-delirious state. At first, Daniela expected Mom to get better over time. That's what happens with colds. At first you get worse and worse, but then you get past a certain point and gradually get better. But in this case it wasn't like that. The illness was too bad to go away on its own. Daniela walked down the street, not knowing why. Maybe she was hoping to get at least some food. Ideally, of course, chicken. She had heard that chicken broth helped with colds. Of course, it was no substitute for expensive medicine, but it might alleviate her mom's condition a bit. She didn't dare hope to get the medicine herself. She couldn't go to the pharmacy and tell them that her mother was dying and she had no money for medicine. She could see it in her mind. She stood in front of the pharmacy counter and asked in a whiny, childish voice, "Aunt, give me these medicines and I will bring you the money later, when my mother has recovered and I can earn." Imagining the aunt's reaction to this statement, Daniela laughed disconsolately. It occurred to her that she could try to earn some money herself. But how? She had no idea. No one would hire children, let alone as young as she was. And it was unlikely she could persuade anyone. She couldn't really steal. The girl was distracted from her thoughts by a strange glint she noticed in a nearby trash garbage can. As she approached it, she realized it came from a bank card lying on top of the trash. Daniela pulled it out and examined it. Attached to the card was a small piece of paper on which 4 digits had been written in neat handwriting. It should be a PIN code. Daniela's mother also had a bank card, although there was almost never any money on it. Sometimes her mother would send her with her to go shopping or to get money from the nearest ATM. So the girl knew very well how to handle such things. "Well, if it's in the trash can," said Daniela, "then it must have been thrown away. And if it has been thrown away, I don't think anyone wants." So the girl went to the nearest ATM, not really expecting to find money on the card. Because who would throw away a card with money on it? But if there is, it will be very useful. She could buy medicine for the mother. Or at least some chicken for the broth. Of course, he had doubts about the appropriateness of such actions. He wondered if the card would have ended up in the wastebasket by mistake. On the other hand, if someone could accidentally throw the money away, then he didn't need it so much. But her situation was desperate. If Mom didn't get help soon, she might even die. Daniela's eyes filled with tears and the girl quickened her pace. When he arrived at the ATM, the first thing he did was ask for the balance on the card. When she saw the amount in the account, her eyes widened. Until then, he had never imagined that one person could have so much money. She calculated that the amount she had seen would have been enough for her and her mother to live on for most of their lives. His doubts were dispelled. It was unlikely that such a wealthy person would suffer much if she took some money to buy the drugs. Daniela was not going to take more than she needed. When she left the bank, she immediately went to the nearest pharmacy. He bought all the medicines his mother needed. She guessed right, there was hardly any money left, less than 100 pesos. Daniela, still thinking about the healing chicken broth, decided to go to the grocery store to see if she could buy something with the money she had left. On her way out of the pharmacy, she bumped into a lady. She looked at her with a strange expression and then asked in surprise, "Girl, you're the one who took the money out of the ATM nearby, aren't you?" Daniela shuddered. She realized that this woman was the cardholder. She was likely to be charged with theft and dragged off to the Guardia. And she wouldn't have time to take the medicine to her mother. The girl's eyes filled with tears again. "I did," he admitted honestly. "But I found the card in the trash, so I figured no one would want it anymore. I just really needed the money. My mother is sick and I couldn't afford to buy medicine for her." Now, calm down," said the woman affectionately. "I know you didn't steal anything. It was my cleaning lady who accidentally dropped the card. We have an office not far from here, and that's how it ended up in this garbage can. Besides, I know how much money was on the card. And you only took a little bit. Besides, it wasn't for you, it was to help someone close to you." Daniela could not calm down, just apologized incoherently and mumbled something about her mother's illness. She showed a bag of medicine and a receipt to prove that she had spent the money on exactly what she had said. Finally, after a few minutes, she managed to stop the flow of tears. "What is your name?" asked the woman. "Daniela," replied the girl in a low voice. "I'm Ursula, nice to meet you. You know, Daniela, why don't we buy your mother some good vitamins? And some groceries. Make her feel better." After buying vitamins at the pharmacy, the two went to the grocery store. The woman picked up a whole basket, fruit, vegetables, milk and, to Daniela's delight, the precious chicken. Now she could make her mother a nice broth. At the age of 7, she already knew how to cook quite well. Ursula helped Daniela carry the groceries home. However, she did not go inside and left everything she had bought in the hallway. The girl invited her savior for refreshments, but she politely declined. "I've had COVID recently," he explained. "I'd better not come in contact with sick people. Besides, your mother obviously doesn't want strangers in the house right now. Here, take my phone number too, just in case." Thanking the woman for her kindness, Daniela gave her mother a dose of medicine and began to make broth. She was very worried about her mother's condition. The incomprehensible semi-delirium was already almost unstoppable. The girl worried that it was too late to get help. 2 days passed. The woman's condition continued to worsen. Daniela could not even feed her mother or get her to take her medication. In the end, she no longer understood what was going on around her, so Daniela decided to call an ambulance. The mother was taken to the hospital. The doctors refused to let the girl in with her, despite all persuasion. Not knowing what to do next, the girl dialed Ursula's number and explained the situation in a halting voice. "I'm sorry to bother you. My mother has taken a turn for the worse. They took her to the hospital, they won't let me see her. I don't even know what to do. I'm sorry, I have no one else to turn." "Don't worry, Daniela," said the woman affectionately. "Don't worry, I'll come and take care of." And it came only half an hour later. "I've been thinking, Daniela." He started practically from the doorway. "If you want, you can stay with us for a while, there's plenty of room in the house, and my husband isn't against it." "There is plenty of room in the house, and my husband is not against it. Have they at least told you which hospital they have taken your mother to?" Daniela just nodded, unable to utter a word. "Okay, I'll go there and talk to the doctors. I'll go over there and talk to the doctors. Maybe we can do something else to help her. Don't worry, she'll be fine." Daniela agreed to stay with Ursula and they went to her house. It turned out that not far from their neighborhood of identical 5-story buildings was another world. They arrived in the private sector of the city, where several streets were lined with mansions. In one of them lived Daniela's savior. After entrusting the child to the care of her husband, who fortunately had the day off, Ursula went directly to the hospital to see Daniela's mother. The girl gave her the number of the hospital and her mother's name. When she arrived at the hospital, the first thing she did was go to the emergency room. Hi. Monica Garcia was supposed to be brought here a couple of hours ago. Are you his relative? The young woman at the reception desk asked lazily. I am his mother. Ursula lied without batting an eyelash. If there was one thing she had learned in her more than 50 years of life, it was that no one in a hospital would talk to a complete stranger. But neither would they check the degree of kinship. The girl at the counter started typing something on her computer keyboard. Then she looked at Ursula. He is in serious condition and has not yet been allowed visitor. May I speak to your doctor? Of course. Second floor, room 23. You're in luck, it's time for family visit. Going up to the office in question, Ursula spoke with the doctor. The conversation was quite brief and as professional as possible. After making it clear that she had money, the woman asked that Monica be moved to the best possible ward, given better medication and treatment. I will pay for everything. No matter how much it is. Do what you have to do and charge. It was all he could do for the sick woman at that moment. So, considering her mission accomplished, she went home. Of course, she trusted her husband, but she still wanted to see for herself how the girl was adjusting. After all, she needed the kind of care and support that only a woman can give a child. Ideally, a mother, of course. But in this situation there was no choice. He found Daniela in a very depressed state. She was not impressed by the luxurious surroundings of the house she was staying in. And not even the fact that she was given a separate room, which many children from poor families dream of, could cheer her up. She sat on the bed with one leg dangling and writhing convulsively. As soon as Ursula entered the room, the girl immediately went to meet her. What's wrong with Mom? She said with difficulty. The doctors are treating her now. Her condition is serious, as you can see, but she is not in danger. It was partly a lie. With pneumonia so advanced, it was no longer certain that her body could cope with the disease, even if she received proper treatment. But she couldn't tell a 7-year-old girl that her beloved mother was on the brink of life and death, and could cross it at any moment. 3 days of intense anticipation passed. Daniela, although believing the woman's words, remained anxious. In the end, the hospital reported that the crisis was over and the patient's life was no longer in danger. Of course, there was still a long way to go, but it was clear that the treatment would be successful. Thanks to Ursula's efforts, Daniela's mother recovered fairly quickly. Within a few days her condition had improved to the point that Ursula was able to visit her. Daniela also wanted to go, but the woman convinced her that it would be better to wait until her mother was fully recovered. In fact, she wasn't sure her conversation was worth listening to for a little girl. Monica, hello. My name is Ursula. And although it sounds strange, I want to warn you right away, to the hospital staff, I am your mother. I had to do it on the sly, otherwise no one would talk to me. You paid for my treatment, didn't you? Monica replied. I'm very grateful to you, but frankly, I don't quite understand. You don't have to thank me, smiled Ursula. It's your beautiful daughter. The girl is very worried about you. Don't worry, she's staying with me now, she's fine. And the woman spoke briefly about how she had met Daniela thanks to a lost bank card. I don't know how to thank him for all this, Monica murmured. I have nothing to offer you. The money you spent on me I will never pay you back. I have more than enough money, Ursula replied. I like you and Daniela very much for some reason, and that's why I wanted to help you. Not just out of pity, but not without it. Tell me how you got into this unpleasant situation in the first place. And we'll try to find a way to make sure it doesn't happen again. The best thanks to me would be to keep you and your daughter fed and safe. It's the same old story, Monica replied. Instead of getting a proper education and a profession, I fell in love with Daniela's father. It was right after high school. I didn't go to college, I thought it was no big deal, I'd get it next year. Then I got pregnant and my boyfriend left me right away. He said I wasn't ready for that kind of responsibility and all that. I didn't have time to study, I got a job as a saleswoman at the market to support Daniela and me. My parents didn't help me either. They drank themselves to death and then they both died. The working conditions were bad, so I got sick. We don't provide sick leave. So I worked until I got very sick. That's the story. Here's the thing, said Ursula as she listened attentively to his story. Give up the market trade before it drives you to your grave. I just fired my maid and I'm looking for a replacement. You have to move into my house with your daughter. There's plenty of room in the house, and the pay will be decent. We'll put Daniela in a good school. You won't need anything. And I'll pay your sick leave, too, if you need. Monica couldn't believe her luck. Just when it seemed there was no hope, this woman appeared. Like a guardian angel. And she offers to solve all her remaining problems at once. Of course, she couldn't refuse such a tempting offer. Monica thanked Ursula's kindness in so many words, but she just laughed. That was the end of the story. A few days later, Daniela convinced Ursula to take her to see her mother. They were both incredibly happy to see her. And it seemed that only now they were finally calming down and stopped worrying about each other. Ursula took the girl home after having given the mother and daughter a lot to talk about. However, the reception was not very warm. Sophia, Ursula's daughter, was at the door, introducing herself for the first time. Where exactly she was, neither her mother nor her father knew. She used to say she was an adult and didn't have to answer to anyone. Which, of course, was true, as she had turned 25. However, her parents were very concerned that their daughter might get into bad company, as her behavior met some of the requirements for that. There was nothing they could do, however, and most of the time they only saw Sophia when she ran out of money and came home to ask for more. Now he was at the door, showing his displeasure. Apparently it was directed at his mother. And when the girl spoke, it was clear that it was. What kind of charity are you playing at? Spending the family's money on some rascal, taking whoever. What the hell are you thinking? What if that girl steals from us? Hi, Sophia, it's so good to see you, replied Ursula. Please don't make a scene in front of the girl. Let me take the girl to her room and then you and I will talk about it, okay? No, it's not right. Turns out the girl already has her room. And then what? You brought her mother here too? This is our house, not a flop house. Sophia, I asked you. The woman's tone became a little colder. Please let us in. You are not yet the owner of this house, and I have the right to do as I please. With these words, he led Daniela past the angry young woman, escorted her upstairs and asked her not to leave the room for the next hour. The girl could hear the uproar erupting from downstairs and understood that she was the cause. But in a few minutes all was quiet. Then she heard footsteps on the stairs and then a knock at the door. Come in, said Daniela shyly, unaccustomed to this kind of delicacy. It was Sophia. I wanted to apologize for what I said downstairs, he said reluctantly. It was very rude of me. I don't mind at all if you and your mother stay with us for a while. His tone, even little Daniela understood, said strictly the opposite. After her recovery, Monica went to live at her rescuer's house. Daniela was happy to learn that they would be staying in the mansion permanently. She had grown accustomed to both the luxury of the surroundings and the company of the owners. In addition, Ursula, as she had promised her, had placed her in a new school, an elite gymnasium. Fortunately, the girl's skills were more than enough to pass the preliminary test. Ursula's husband, Nicholas, turned out to be a very nice man. Quiet, cultured, very intellectual. Like his wife, he was very easy to get along with. Sometimes the three of them would chat quietly over a soft drink in the afternoon. Monica was very diligent in her chores. So much so that her landlady had to remind her from time to time that overdoing it was not healthy. Monica, put down the rag. There hasn't been any dust left on this shelf for a long time, he said. And anyway, you remember that you have a normal working day, which ended 2 hours ago, right? I hired you as a maid, not as a slave. Let's go for a drink. Daniela is eager to tell her mother what she learned at school today. In short, everything was going well for them. Except for one unfortunate detail. Sophia. She was the same age as Monica, but unlike her, she acted like she was still 16. She wasn't going to college or working, just spending her parents' money at fancy restaurants and boutiques. The parents were frustrated, of course, but they could not deny their beloved daughter anything. Although Ursula often lamented that she could not understand where they had gotten such a lapse in her education and why she behaved like that. I don't know why that is. Everyone in our family is a hard worker. My husband and I were not always millionaires. We started out as simple engineers. We earned all our money by working hard. Monica was not to Sophia's liking. Perhaps jealousy and incomprehension as to why her mother was wasting her time and money with a market vendor. From time to time she would try to prod the young woman. She would allude to her previous job, her inability to dress fashionably, or her poverty. But the favorite topic, of course, was Daniela. More specifically, the fact that Monica was raising her alone, without her father. The fact was that Sophia herself had had a fiancé for several years, and seemed to be very proud of. Weird girls, who choose the man they want and then wonder how they got dumped. She told her friend over the phone, but always so Monica could hear her. My Raul is not like that. He would never pick a guy who could get a girl pregnant. Raul was almost more trouble than his fiancé. Ignoring Sophia's taunts wasn't too difficult for Monica. She had heard a lot about her while working at the market. She kept working, that's all. But Raul, on the other hand, sometimes gave her very ambiguous glances or, while Sophia was not there, he said not very nice compliments. In short, he behaved like a typical ladies' man. No doubt the owner's daughter would have noticed these calls herself if she hadn't been so busy being narcissistic. There was no doubt in her mind that she was absolutely irresistible and that her fiancé was madly in love with her. Monica was well aware that if Raul was in love, it was with Sophia's parents' money. That's why he spent his time on her. But he didn't mind stealthily falling in love with another girl. And who knows how long this story would last, and how it would end if one day a very large sum of money wasn't stolen from the homeowner's safe. Basically, anyone could have taken it. Ursula and Nicholas were very outgoing and their house was always full of guests. Sophia, of course, had her own version of how the money disappeared. Ungrateful bitch, she told Monica as soon as Ursula had gathered the family for a family meeting and brought them up to speed. My parents brought you back from the dead and this is how you repay them? As if they don't pay you enough for your day job. Maybe your daughter stole it. She's already proven to be a thief, I remember. Sophia, stop it. Her mother interrupted her sharply. I don't think Monica could have taken that money. Who else? The young woman didn't let up. Me? I did not say that. I don't know what could have happened. I think we should call the guard and let them sort it out. But first, if any of you needed that money no matter what for, I suggest you confess now and we'll avoid law enforcement. It can all be returned by tomorrow, and we'll pretend it never happened. Yes, Sophia continued. Confess, get out of our house and go back to your market. Although you might be better off in prison. Enough, Sophia. Ursula interrupted her again. I don't want to hear unfounded accusations. I've already said everything I wanted to say. I'll give you time to think about. Monica, although she knew very well that she was not to blame, slept very badly the following night. She knew that if the Guardia came, no one would investigate anything. A poor girl, who had been hired as a pity maid, had stolen money from her gullible owners, the simplest explanation, without even needing to prove anything. On the other hand, she sensed a subtle change in attitude toward her. The owners of the house, while still impeccably polite, continued to show a kind of coldness toward her. Ursula, of course, said she didn't believe Monica could be a thief, but she understandably had her doubts about it too. And if the money turned up in the safe tomorrow, no doubt everyone would think she had done. Whichever way you look at it, the situation was desperate. Perhaps it was Sophia who took the money from the parents without asking, in order to set a trap. Sophia had no reason to steal. Her parents would have given her almost any amount without asking questions. It was late, around 1 o'clock in the morning, when Daniela entered her room. The girl lived in the next room and must have heard her mother tossing and turning in bed, unable to fall asleep. She must have come to ask what was wrong. Monica was beginning to think about what she was going to say. Monica didn't care much about herself, but her daughter did? How would she explain to Daniela why they had suddenly been banished from paradise? And the fact that she had to leave home seemed almost an imminent event. She didn't yet know that her beautiful daughter had come not with questions or comfort, but with a solution to her problem. Mom, please forgive me. He began in words Monica did not expect to hear. Why? He asked carefully, fearing the word. I know it's not okay to eavesdrop on people's conversations. And that adults sometimes talk about things that children don't need to hear. But I happen to know what you were talking about in the kitchen today. And I also know who took the money you were talking about. And when I saw him do it, I wondered if he was allowed to. And I recorded it with my phone just in case. Monica hugged her daughter tightly. What a smart little girl she is growing up to be. And diplomatic too. Not long ago, Daniela received a smartphone, a birthday present from Ursula. She didn't want to hear any objections from the girl's mother. She said that nowadays phones are needed even for studying, while money is better spent on something more useful. So, let it be. So the smartphone came in handy at the most unexpected moment. The next day, of course, no money appeared in the safe. Sophia was unusually quiet this time, but there was a wicked smile on her lips. She seemed absolutely certain that now the hated maid would be out of her life forever. However, she was in for a very unpleasant surprise. Monica, though kind and gentle by nature, had to make an effort to suppress the gloating in her. After all, the young woman had caused her a lot of unpleasantness, but now she had a chance to tear her down. Besides, maybe she would finally realize how wrong she had been acting all this time. "Well," said Ursula sadly as she opened the safe and made sure the missing money didn't turn up, "I guess we'll have to call the guard after all. Unless, of course, someone wants to tell me right now." "Wait," Monica began. She saw the gleam of triumph in Sophia's eyes and how sad her mother's face had become. "I know who took the money. And I have proof." Daniela saw the thief and recorded it with her phone. He placed the smartphone where everyone could see the screen and turned on the recording. Although the angle was not the best, you could clearly see who was taking the money out of the safe and then carefully closing it. It was Raul, Sophia's fiancé. In spite of everything, the owners decided not to go to the Guardia. After all, Raul was not exactly a stranger. They simply demanded that he return the money, threatening to call the Guardia if he did not. Raul was incredibly angry with both his girlfriend's parents and herself. He made a nasty fuss in their house. He shouted that they had enough money and that they had not given him what little he needed. Finally, he added that he wanted nothing to do with such stingy people or his daughter, of course. And he left, slamming the door loudly. Contrary to Monica's hopes, this situation did not make Sophia feel better. On the contrary, it became even more unbearable. As soon as the door closed behind her fiancé, now obviously her ex, Sophia continued the scene he had started with double the force. "So a stranger can steal money from your card," she yelled at her mother. "But your own daughter's fiancé can't even lend a small sum of money? It's a penny, isn't it? You wouldn't even have noticed if you hadn't slipped another small wad of bills into the safe. Do you even know what your so-called fiancé needed the money for? Who cares? There is a difference. We've never denied you or him small expenses. But there's a pretty decent amount here. And if it was for a good cause, we gave it to him and he knew it. There must be something here we don't like," said Nicholas sensibly. "You never like anything if it has anything to do with me." Sophia was still hysterical. "You may have ruined a man's life. Of course you have." He ran out of the kitchen, slamming the door with a loud bang. In the hallway he passed Monica, who was dusting the hangers, trying to ignore the commotion in the kitchen. It wasn't easy. Sophia was screaming in a way that the whole house could hear. She could only be glad that her daughter was in school and couldn't hear the horror. "You!" Realizing Monica, Sophia shifted her focus. "This is all thanks to you. From the moment you entered the house, I knew it wasn't going to end well. What a clever girl, eh?" She recorded the thief with her phone. "Do you really think I believed you? Raul and I love each other, and you got jealous because you couldn't keep your man and decided to separate us?" "Sophia," Monica tried to reason with her, "don't you see? Raul only liked your money. And when he realized he couldn't reach into your parents' pockets anymore, he took off." "Don't you dare say that about him. Don't you say his name at all. How dare you talk to me like that, bitch?" The next few days in the house were hell for Monica, from which she diligently tried to keep her daughter safe. However, Daniela kept hearing scandals, which from time to time erupted over unimportant things. The poor girl was beginning to feel guilty for what she had done and had shown. But after all, she only wanted to save her mother. Sophia was in no hurry to leave the house, although she had repeatedly threatened never to set foot here again. Instead, she made ugly scenes to both her parents and Monica. However, the only thing she had the decency to do was not to make a scene in front of the girl. "We all have to get over it," said Ursula one night after another scandal. "And her, and all of us. She's angry. She really seemed to be in love with the scoundrel, and now she's getting over his betrayal. She'll get over." She spoke confidently, but her voice was trembling. Monica could see that the mother of the family was also on the verge of losing her temper. She felt very sorry for the beautiful woman, but had no idea how she could help her. She also felt guilty about everything that had happened late, but one day everything changed. If only, of course, it was because Sophia had finally realized everything and calmed down. But the reason was completely different and, unfortunately, far from cheerful. Indeed, the tragedy that had occurred had calmed the house, but now everyone in it wished they could go back to the time when the dishes in the kitchen rattled with the cries of the owner's dog. Monica was sitting on the bed in her room reading when Sophia burst in. At first it looked like she was going to be shocked again. But the next moment it was clear that something had happened. Her face was as white as chalk and tears were rolling down her cheeks. With difficulty she managed to speak. "Dad. There was an accident. He's in the hospital now. He needs a transfusion. Mom asks, will you come with us to give blood? He has a rare blood type, so the more options the better." "Of course," he said. Without going into details, which she did not know, she explained to Daniela that Nicholas was seriously ill and needed help. "That's why all the adults have to leave for a while. So you're in charge. Be good." "Of course, Mom." As quickly as possible, they packed their bags and headed for the hospital. Ursula tried to drive herself, but the two young women managed to convince her to wait for the driver. The woman's hands were shaking and she should not have been driving in that condition. An hour later, they were at the blood transfusion station. One by one, samples were taken for compatibility testing and various necessary tests. Holding their breath, the three women waited in the hallway for the results, jumping every time a door opened. Everyone was aware that there were hours left. Sophia clung to Monica's arm with a death grip. She was very restless. She moved her leg, sobbed or started to cry softly and wept. "If Dad dies." "And the last thing I said to him was, he's not going to die," Ursula interrupted, but there was not a hint of the confidence in her voice that she was trying to convey. Monica did her best to reassure Sophia, even though she herself was trembling. Although she and Sophia did not have a very good relationship, she felt sorry for the young girl. Perhaps too spoiled by her doting parents, and never having faced real adversity, now they were both experiencing a common pain that united them. After all, for Monica, Nicholas was practically the father she had never had. Her biological father had never been interested in his daughter's life. In fact, the only thing that interested her parents was the presence of alcohol in the house. And in a sense Ursula and Nicholas had replaced her mother and father, giving her the warmth she had lacked in childhood. At last the office door opened and the doctor came out. The expression on his face was one of great perplexity. It was impossible to tell what news he brought walking down the hallway toward them. All three, however, hoped for the best. But it was evident that they were not prepared for what they were about to hear in the next few minutes. "It's really not the best time to talk about this. But you, Sophia, are not related to our patient. Neither are you." The last sentence was addressed to Ursula. "Your blood, unfortunately, is not suitable for transfusion." All three thought about it, but could not understand it. It seemed silly. In what way was Sophia not related to Ursula or Nicholas? How was that possible? It was shocking. But now it was somewhat overshadowed by the last sentence, the one about the blood not matched. The doctor, meanwhile, after letting them recover from what they had heard, continued, "But your blood, Monica, is a perfect match. And even without a detailed analysis I can say with certainty that you are a close relative of our patient." There was no time to speculate and Monica went to donate blood for Nicholas. An hour later the complicated operation that was to save his life began. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Of course, there is always the risk of something going wrong, especially when the patient is in such a serious condition. Even so, the best doctors that could be found in such a short time were fighting for Nicholas' life. The hardest part was finding the right blood for him. After all, the blood group was rare, while in his small-town blood banks did not seem to exist at all. The operation lasted several hours, but was quite successful. Nicholas was still in a stable and serious condition, but the main threats to his life had been eliminated. Now all that remained was to entrust the man to the care of the doctors and wait for him to regain consciousness and be able to talk to his family and friends. Ursula, for her part, felt uneasy about the doctor's words. To begin with, she convinced both young women to undergo a DNA test. She confirmed what the doctor at the donor center had told them. Monica was a blood relative, most likely a daughter. Sophia, on the other hand, was not related to either of them. The woman enlisted the help of private investigators to solve the mystery. They conducted an investigation, which turned out to be quite simple. It was a small town, population growth was low, few people gave birth. Thus, it turned out that in one of the 3 maternity hospitals only 2 women gave birth on the due date. Ursula was one of them. At that time, the family, not very wealthy, could not afford a separate room, so the woman lay in the common room. At that time they were glad that only one person accompanied her. Practically a VIP treatment without additional charge. Ursula remembered her companion from that time. The woman was not much of a talker. She mumbled a lot, complaining about life, but it was unlikely that she could engage in conversation. She wasn't much of a nuisance either, so no one paid much attention to her. Unlike Ursula, who was regularly visited by her husband, parents, and friends, the second parturient was not visited by anyone. She clearly came from a dysfunctional family and evidently intended to continue her marginal lifestyle even after delivery. It was a pity in advance for this person, who had turned out to be of no use to anyone even before she was born. However, nothing could be done about it. Both women gave birth within days of each other. Both newborns were girls. Both babies were strong and healthy, much to the joy of their mothers. All 4 had to stay in the hospital for a few more days after being discharged. Ursula had had a hard time then, she had had a difficult delivery. She therefore vaguely remembered the rest of the events. This explained why she had not noticed the change. It was one of the midwives who did it, the detectives quickly found out. The hospital management found out fairly quickly, but not before the 2 women had been discharged. As is often the case in state institutions, especially in small towns, they decided that fights would not be tolerated. And since it was no longer possible to rectify this discreetly, they left things as they were. Only the matron was fired, and shortly thereafter she ended up in a psychiatric hospital for life. It is likely that baby swapping was the reason she was placed there. But no one investigated why she behaved that way. But detectives got to the bottom of the woman's motives. Apart from a mental disorder, they turned out to be trivial jealousy. She decided that if she had problems, no one in the world should be happy. Especially a woman who was able to have and give birth to a baby. Which, by pure coincidence, was Ursula. The matron herself was also very eager to have children. But all her attempts ended in failure. At first she was unable to get pregnant for a long time. When she finally did, she discovered that she was physically incapable of having a child. She ended up miscarrying at a fairly early stage. From then on, she held a grudge against all women who could have children, unlike her. But she did not quit her job because she had nowhere else to go. And so, little by little, year after year, looking at the happy mothers she herself helped give birth to, she slowly went mad. Of course, no one noticed. And so, the moment Ursula gave birth, something in that poor woman's mind was completely broken. Perhaps it was because she had everything the midwife didn't: a loving husband, caring friends and parents, a well-paid job and good prospects. And now she had a baby. So the midwife decided she had to spoil this perfect life a little. She took the baby from the outcast and planted it on Ursula. Clearly, like it or not, genetics will take its toll. It's not going to be easy for that woman with someone else's baby, and not even that. That was how Ursula and Nicholas' own daughter ended up in a family of drunks who never gave her the attention she deserved. Sophia, for her part, drew her lucky ticket to a family that would soon become very rich. And at that time they lived very well. But, as the midwife expected, the girl's character was not only influenced by her upbringing in the family, but also by her genetic peculiarities. That was why she behaved like that. She also believed that all her parents' money, everything they had achieved, belonged to her by birthright. "What now?" asked Sophia after hearing the story. "What now?" asked Ursula. "Well, I'm not your daughter, and I have no right to be here." "Don't be silly," answered Ursula. "I've fed you all these years, I've raised you, I've educated you. And I loved you, of course, how could I not? You don't know who replaced whom or who your biological parents are. You are my daughter. Unless, of course, you're willing to think of me as your mother. Of course, Mom, I love you too." Sophia burst into tears and threw herself into Ursula's arms. Monica watched this scene with some embarrassment, not understanding what to do now. It turned out that her real parents were that rich couple, who had also done a lot for her and her daughter. But they did not raise her. They didn't hear her first word, they didn't see her first steps. They weren't the ones who got her first A in school or her first reprimand. Although the people who raised her didn't pay attention to either. And yet, in spite of everything, he loved them, the people he considered his parents. After all, there were good times. After all, they had raised her, they hadn't starved her, they had clothed her somehow, they had never beaten her, or anything like that. Yes, her childhood hadn't been particularly happy, but it hadn't been horrible either. His parents, although they drank most of the time, were never violent. Even when they ran out of liquor, they used to go to sleep to get another bottle in the morning. Occasionally one of them would find a part-time job, so the family didn't go hungry, although it wasn't a very satisfying life either. But even that was not always the case. Monica found in her head some memories of her earliest childhood, when her mother was still sober. The father had been drinking, of course, but he hadn't dragged his wife with him. She diligently cared for the baby, whom she obviously loved in her own way. Monica remembered her mother's joy when she took her first steps, and how she would read bedtime stories to her when she herself was a little younger than Daniela is now. How she could go to her mother with any of her sorrows and receive support. And how proud and happy she was of her daughter's smallest and most insignificant success, and how little by little she stopped caring. She dresses, puts on her shoes, more or less eats, comes home every day. Well, whatever. So everything was going well. Her stories no longer touched her mother's heart. The only thing that interested the woman now was the presence or absence of the coveted body. Perhaps things would have been different if she had had the strength to leave her father. But, for some reason, she continued to cling to him. Out of habit or fear of not surviving on her own. Although it seemed that the father did not participate in the family life, it may be that she did not realize. Monica tried to study as much as she tried to rebel. Several times she even ran away from home for a long time. But no one looked for her, no one cared. The story ended naturally. Her parents were drinking and one day she came home to find them dead. That day she had just turned 18. Did you feel anything? Strangely enough, yes. In spite of everything, she was very sad for her mother and father. And she was grateful to them for somehow being able to bring her to adulthood. She knew that deep down they loved her. At least that was true in her mother's case. To Ursula, she was, in fact, a stranger, in whose fate, out of pity and kindness, she took part. Monica was grateful to the woman and felt a warm affection for her. But she was not sure that the feelings were mutual. "I have enough room in my heart for 2 daughters," the woman said, as if reading his thoughts. "In fact, I had always thought how nice it would be for Sophia to have a little sister or brother. But the first birth was very difficult, so I didn't dare repeat," and he hugged Monica tightly. A few seconds later he felt Sophia join them. It seemed like a truly miraculous reunion of a long-lost family. Only one person was missing to complete the picture. Nicholas was discharged from the hospital a few months later, although the improvement came much sooner. Until then, the whole family, including little Daniela, had come to visit him. As expected, the man was very surprised to hear about the change in the babies. But, like Ursula, he was happy to have 2 daughters. Sophia apologized for her disgusting behavior both to her parents and to Monica, whom she now called her sister. Of course, it was not only the fact that she was not her own daughter that affected her. The accident that had nearly taken her father away from her had also been a great shock to her and had made her rethink some things. The support Monica had given her in that difficult moment had convinced her that she had been unfair to her. Their shared pain brought them together and made them understand each other, and they felt a certain mutual sympathy. And then it also became clear that they were more closely related than one would have imagined. As for little Daniela, she did not seem at all surprised when she was kindly explained how things were going, omitting unnecessary details. In her childish mind, such stories were still the order of the day. So the girl was simply glad to have grandparents. After a while she got used to her aunt as well. Of course, it was not easy, given Sophia's previous behavior. But the young woman did her best to make it up to her parents, Monica and her daughter. By the time Nicholas recovered, his family had reunited and were living amicably in the same mansion. Sometime after her return, the father gathered all the adults for a family meeting. He chose a time when Daniela was at school, so that he could be sure that her curious ears would not be disturbed. The occasion was a serious one, and it was hardly necessary for the girl to know anything about. "I have been doing a lot of thinking," he said. "Ever since I had regained consciousness and was able to make sense of things. Then you told me about Monica and Sophia being switched at the hospital, and that took my mind off everything else for a while, which didn't surprise me. But then the reflex came back again. And I have to inform you that the accident I was in was no accident." There was a tense silence. Everyone was trying to understand what Nicholas had said. It occurred to all of them more or less the same thing. The father, with his usual gentleness, had just told everyone that someone had tried to kill him. This revelation was shocking and frightening. No one dared to say anything. Everyone waited for the rest of the speech, and soon there was. "I think my brake hoses were cut. But it's also possible that someone pushed me off the road into the ravine where my car exploded. I can't be sure about that, because I don't remember the moment of the fall very well. I only remember that the brakes didn't work, although they should have. I had just had a routine checkup and everything was fine. But if so, it was done by someone who knew exactly when and where I was going." "But who could have wished you ill?" exclaimed Sophia in horror. "Well, you, for example," said Nicholas with a mocking smile, making it clear in his tone that it was a joke. "Seriously, I don't know, and that's what bothers me the most. Someone could have turned not against me personally, but against our whole family. In that case, everyone is in danger. In fact, that's why I've called everyone. I want everyone to be as careful as possible until the culprit is found. I'm going to file a report today and let the security services handle." This is what was done. A report was filed and the Guardia began their work. Knowing that this was a man with some influence in the city, they tried to investigate as thoroughly as possible. They began by inspecting the car, which confirmed Nicholas' fears. Indeed, the brakes were defective. In addition, some of the dents in the hull could not have been caused by a fall into a ravine. Consequently, his vague recollection that the car had been pushed was also confirmed. In other words, someone wanted his plan to ensure that Nicholas did not get out of the car alive. As soon as the family was informed of the discovery, armed guards were hired for each of them. Daniela was told that these two aunts Monica had insisted that her daughter be protected by women to make her feel more comfortable would temporarily accompany her to and from school. She was not allowed to go anywhere else for the time being. The girl, intelligent beyond her years, did not argue, knowing that no one would impose such restrictions for nothing. All cars were thoroughly checked by security guards before each trip. Fortunately, nothing else suspicious was found. But no one thought to relax. Of course, maybe it was just a consolation, and after the failed assassination attempt the villain had abandoned his plans. Or he had a personal grudge against Nicholas and not against his whole family. But one can never be too cautious. Meanwhile, the investigation was in full swing. All family members were thoroughly questioned, but no one could remember anything suspicious that day. It was business as usual. No one could imagine that Nicholas was so disturbing as to want to kill. He and his wife ran their business honestly and didn't get in anyone's way. They made a lot of money, of course, by the standards of their town. but not so much that anyone would want to take the company from them or anything like that. In short, the initial theory of the investigation that the bombing had something to do with the job turned out to be untenable. Then they began to elaborate on the idea that it could have been a personal vendetta. And that's when the first and only suspect emerged. The only serious conflict there had been in this family in recent times had to do with Sophia's ex-fiancé. He was the only one who had a motive for revenge. Admittedly, it was rather hard to believe that he would try to kill Nicholas just because he was not allowed to steal money. Of course, even Sophia had already realized that Raoul was, to put it mildly, a dishonest man. But there was a difference between an Alfonsinista and even a thief and a murderer. Moreover, he did not threaten the family. He simply left, slamming the door loudly, and no one heard from him again. At first, Sophia tried to contact her ex-fiancé, but he did not return her call. Basically, none of them knew anything about Raoul. Was he working somewhere or studying? Who he hung out with, what he did in his free time, who his parents were. It was up to the Guardia to find out. And, after a while, they discovered that he had a motive for wanting Nicholas dead. "We have found out," said the investigator as he summoned them to his office, "that it was indeed this man who committed the attack against you. However, you can dismiss your personal guard, this man will not bother you anymore." "How can you be so sure?" asked Nicholas. "Because he is dead. It didn't take long to find him. The body was found in his own home." It turned out that Raoul was involved in a large financial fraud. He was also a gambling addict. And to some extent, he was lucky. But at some point his luck ran out and he discovered that he owed some criminals a rather large sum of money. They were not going to wait until he married Sophia to get their hands on the money more or less officially. So he decided to steal, hoping that no one would investigate the matter and blame it on the maid, who had arrived at the house relatively recently. But the plan didn't work, and there was no other way to get a large sum of money quickly. Raoul realized that it was all over. The people he had contacted were going to come after him. They would take his money or his life. So he decided he would not die alone. So he tried to take the man he thought was responsible for his problems with. "I must thank you," said the investigator as he finished his story. "Thanks to your case, we have been able to track down a gang that we have been chasing for years. Soon they will all be behind bars, where they belong." After weeks of tension, the family could finally breathe. The personal guards were dismissed. Daniela was able to walk freely again and reunite with her school friends. Guests returned to the house and everyone was welcome. After several months of discussions and persuasion, the family got a dog. The girl, as promised, took care of the puppy herself. She walked it, fed it, and brushed it. At this stage of her life, she is doing well in school and dreams of becoming a veterinarian. Monica and Sophia have become great friends over time and spend much of their free time together. Sophia has made up her mind and enrolled in a university, deciding that it is never too late to get a good career. Ursula and Nicholas hope that their daughters will help them with the business and that they will be able to take over the management of the company. If you like the story, please like and subscribe to the channel.